I hopefully, what we want to do in our first, in just these two studies, because we're just going to do two, and I really just want to, first of all, get an overview of the book. So what's it all about? Can we actually make sense of it as a whole? That's what we're going to try and do tonight. So it's kind of a bit high level, I suppose, but trying to set a framework. And then in next week's class, we hope to then just look at chapter 1, because I would suggest that actually everything about the book is in chapter 1. And I would suggest to you that'll set a good base for the whole of the book. Okay, so that's where we want to go and try and uncover and try and get out of the chariot, so we're not sort of riding side by side with the guy going, what's it all about? So that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully the idea is perhaps to get us a little bit more excited ourselves, I suppose. There won't be any great necessarily practical insights necessarily, but more about, hey, I think I can get this, and things to do as you're reading Isaiah for yourself. That's kind of where we want to land in the next 2 nights. All right. Now, the first thing we notice about Isaiah in the first century is that the prophecy of Isaiah was actually written down when we come to the first century. So we want to start there, and actually, if you can go to Luke chapter 4, because there we actually see something quite interesting, I think, about Isaiah in the first century. Luke chapter 4. And we're going to read from verse 16. I suppose I better read, so because I think next door and I don't know wherever is getting zoomed. So verse 16 of Luke 4 says, and Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he'd opened the book, he found the place where it was written. So the word book there, by the way, is the word scroll. That's what it means. Versions translate it like that. He opened up, or it was delivered unto him, the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. So that tells us, first of all, they had a written copy of the book of Isaiah in the first century. Now, I want you to notice what he does. You see that in verse 17? When he opened the scroll, when he unrolled the scroll, right? That's the first thing we notice. He unrolls the scroll, and I kind of, when I read that, don't you just sort of love that picture? You know, he walks in, they give him a scroll, so it's printed, like it's a written out scroll, and he opens the scroll, and I can sort of picture him reading that, and it says he found the place where it was written. And then there's a quote from Isaiah chapter 61 and verses 1 and 2. So he opens up the scroll. Now, I reckon the difference with then and now is that we can remember, what's Isaiah 53? You can remember certain verses, but Isaiah 53 verse 8, you can kind of find it, you know. But there was no chapter and verse. He opens up the scroll and he knew where to look on the page, because it was just all run together with all the Hebrew, all written out, and he can find it on the page, and he opens it up and he finds the place where it was written. So there's no chapters, no specific verses. He knows where to look on the page, and he reads Isaiah 61 and what we know as verses 1 and 2. And verse 20 says, and he closed the scroll and he gave it again to the minister, and he sat down, and the eyes of all them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. So then he rolls up the scroll. It's kind of deliberate. Unrolls the scroll. He finds it on the page. He actually can know it. He reads what we would know as 61 verses 1 to 2, and then he rolls it back up again and hands it back to the person that given it to him. So in the first century, there was a written copies of the book of Isaiah. All right, so that's just to really illustrate that. And the Lord and the apostles quoted or alluded to Isaiah more than any other prophet in the Old Testament. Now, in fact, I did a bit of an exercise in the lead up to this to try and find out how many New Testament passages quote Isaiah. All right, now they may quote the same one, by the way. So Isaiah 6 was quoted about 7 or 8 times in the New Testament, so that was counted as 7 or 8 in the list. So how many times do you reckon New Testament passages quote the Isaiah? And look, I've only found a certain number, and I'm sure there's more out there.
66.
No.
36.
There's 128 is what I've found, and I can give you a list if you're interested, of the ones, the quotations or allusions. There's 128 New Testament passages that quote from the book of Isaiah, and that may quote, as I say, the same passage, 2 verses in Isaiah, quoted 7 or 8 times. So I've counted them more than once. All right, you understand what I mean there? So that's just gives you an indication. I gave up because I kept adding to it, and I thought, you know what, I better actually study the book. So I kind of gave up. But if you can, I'm happy to share what I found, and I'd like to grow the list if I can. I did ask at Bible school and put it on the wall, and no one really added to it. So either they,
but then they weren't right.
well, some people did. Some people did. They wrote a couple of things. But yeah, so I'd like to actually grow the list if you can find more. So I'm happy to share that list. But at least 128 New Testament passages that quote or allude to Isaiah. And it's just for interest, what you can find there. Is this working? No.
I think was that 128 times it was quoted, or 128 separate different Isaiah passages?
No, that's what I mean. It's 128 New Testament passages that quote Isaiah probably 80, 85 times, something like that. So it's 128 different places in the New Testament that refer or quote it or allude to it. Now you might argue about some of the allusions. What I've done is use the margin references quite good from the translators. But there's also a number of books that people have written down.
Do you happen to look at how many different passages of Isaiah were?
There is a suggestion from a couple of writers that I read. They've done that, and there's about 80 to 85 separate Isaiah passages. But there's 128. You could count them up because I got it on a spreadsheet. So if everyone's good on the spreadsheet, you can actually flip it and add them up the other way. So I suppose I should do that. So. But I think it was about 80 to 85 separate Isaiah passages, 128 that I found in the New Testament individually.
And I think my inspired margin, MW.
Oh, well, then that must be right. Yeah, we're on the right track here. Yeah.
Says 40 references in Revelation.
Well, yeah, so I've just got that up here on the screen. So there's, I actually don't have the actual number, but 25% of the quotations of that 128, so if that's roughly, you probably calculated it. So 25% of that is in Revelation, 17% in Romans, which I found interesting, and 13% in Matthew. So that's 55% are in those 3 books, and the rest make up that scale, generally speaking. But it's interesting, and we can chat about it later of why you think it's in that sort of order, but it's quite interesting. For example, it's used in the New Testament, like in Romans, particularly around the area that Gentiles will be saved. And I wouldn't have thought, it just surprised me. So it teaches, it's Isaiah is used to teach things like the good news about the future kingdom, Jew and Gentile can be saved, resurrection, the Jewish attitude to Christ and to the scriptures, Christ's suffering, Christ's character, faith, and a whole bunch of other things that I started to try and allocate it, but they're the fundamental things that I thought, this is surprising to me. So that gives you just hopefully a bit of a feel that what we're dealing with is really an incredible book. And I think it's something that if we can get our enthusiasm boosted by just having a bit of chat about it, I think it's a great thing. That's a good outcome because certainly the Lord Jesus Christ and the apostles had their minds back in Isaiah a lot, as you can see from that sheer numbers of what they wrote. and what they spoke about. So that's what we want to try and achieve. All right, well, let's start. And really what we're going to do, so if you can come across to Isaiah, let's go and let's start in chapter 1. And we're really only going to do one verse tonight. All right, we're going to really just focus on one verse. And it's quite an important verse. We're going to start in chapter 1 of Isaiah and verse 1. The vision of Isaiah the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Now, many translations format this verse to highlight that verse 1 is a heading or a title. In fact, the Net Bible and the Companion Bible, they call it out as the heading of the book. They actually have heading of the book, verse 1. All right, and then it goes on to something else. All right, so verse 1 is the highlight, is the title or the heading for the whole book. Now, I think it's worthwhile, and what we suggested at Bible school for the teenagers particularly, is to colour verse 1 in a special colour, because that really highlights verse 1. It's the heading of the book. And it's great when you, I know it's a long heading, but it's helpful when you see a book on the shelf. We always read the title. Because it gives you a bit of a feel about what it's about. And that's what we should do with Isaiah. So verse 1 is the title of the book, the heading for the whole book. All right. Now, you'll notice then, let's have a look at the heading. So it says, the vision of Isaiah the son of Amos. So the first thing is this idea of the word vision. Simply means, Strong says, a sight, a dream, a revelation, oracle. It's not necessarily some dramatic but some dream or something like Daniel might have had or anything like that necessarily, but it just simply means a prophetic communication. It's an oracle, it's a revelation of God. Now, the interesting thing is that this vision is something that he saw in his mind. How do we know that?
Because it says it.
Very good, all right. Because it says it, verse 1 says, it's the vision of Isaiah the son of Amos, which he saw. Okay? Have a look at chapter 2 and verse 1. The word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Have a look at chapter 6, verse 1. And it's probably actually worth colouring these in different colour. Just little flags as you go through. Chapter 6 and verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne. So here's something he's seen. This time he actually did see a vision, as chapter 6 points out. And then finally in chapter 13 and verse 1, as he starts to introduce the burdens, which go on for 10 chapters in Isaiah, it's probably worth colouring this in, because chapter 13 verse 1 says, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. So it's a vision, it's a prophetic communication that was so real that he was able to see the things that he wrote and talked about. And I would also suggest that it's one vision. It's not, you'll notice, a series of different ideas or grouping of different ideas brought together. It calls it one vision. It's the vision which he saw. It's the vision, singular. Now, we know that also, if you want to write this down, here's a passage in 2 Chronicles 32, verse 32. It says, now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his goodness, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. All right? So it's clearly one vision. It's the vision that Isaiah saw. So the whole book is described as the vision of Isaiah. It's one vision, one message, a consistent theme flows through it. That's what we get from the initial word of the heading. It's a message so vivid in his mind, he saw it, and he saw the word, he saw the burdens that he wrote. Now, I think that's something we need to think about when we read Isaiah. You know, the way I used to read it is you'd read it and you'd rush through the words. You just sort of read the words and you kind of, Or maybe I'm getting some blank looks here. We have read Isaiah. Yeah. Do you read it like me or not? Now just to read the words and that's the servant. Oh, I know the servant prophecy, but all the rest of it, I'm not sure. The burdens and all that. You just read the words and you move on, perhaps with a perplexed look. But what I've realised is what we need to do is to actually slow down and actually to try and get the words into our imagination like Isaiah did. That he saw it very vividly in his mind. He saw these words and we want to try and do the same. Right, well, what about the writing style? Now, you should already have your worksheet, so hopefully if you can start to, this is where we can actually write some stuff down on your worksheets, just so you've got something to take away from tonight. Because when it comes to the words and how it is written, what we find is this. This is the first thing. You'll notice you've got 2 points we want to highlight about the writing style and with some examples. So here you've got, the first thing I want you to notice is, has everyone got a worksheet, by the way? There's, everyone got a worksheet? There's a couple more. Oh, okay.
Could you please give them out, Michael?
Yeah, I'll do that. Hello. All right, so this is the first thing about writing style. So that's the first one I want you just to write down there. Much of the book is Hebrew poetry. It's imagery, it's got rhythm, it's got metaphors. So it has this vivid imagery and figures of speech and play on words. And it's a book full of amazing colour, a depth of and a certain rhythm about the words in the book. So it's designed to bring to life those pictures in our imagination. We just need to, I think, slow down and just let each verse come to life. So, when we read, I'll give you some examples. So when we read Isaiah 40 verse 6, it says, and everyone knows it, all flesh is grass. What's the image that comes into your mind? What's the picture? Now, I asked Mum this. She can't even remember me asking it, but I did do it again this afternoon, and she did the same thing. So when I asked my mother, what's the image? And she can draw stuff. She's actually quite good, very bit arty that way. I said, what's the image that you're getting in your mind when you read all flesh is grass? And she explained it to me, what it meant, we're dying and so on. And I kept saying to her, no. What's the image that you're getting in your mind? What's the picture?
Paddock.
A paddock. Now, okay, a paddock. That's good. We're all going to get a different picture, mind you. But let's just slow down and just think about it. When we read Isaiah, just slow it down. Here's an image. Obviously, it's not all flesh is grass. It's not literal, is it? So it's an image of something. So all flesh is grass. So we need to stop and we need to try and picture it. So that's what I came up with. All flesh is grass. And so is grass in the shape of a human being. And in that shape, all flesh is grass. That's the mental image that these words, I think, are designed to generate for us. When it says in Isaiah 2 and verse 4, you turn your sword into plowshares. What's the picture that you get? What's the picture?
A blacksmith.
A blacksmith bending stuff.
A bent sword.
A bent sword. So we're going to get slightly different pictures, but let's get a picture. All right, that's the main thing I want to try and draw out of it. Yeah, so I had that, a sword now being used and turned into like a ploughshare. Isaiah 13 verse 2 says, lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain. So a banner, immediately you kind of picture someone sticking a flag on top of a high mountain. That's the banner. So let's get that imagery happening as we read it. The one I really like is Isaiah 1 verse 8. It's kind of my favourite in Isaiah because I don't know why. It's a shack in a cucumber field. For some reason that just gets me, right? I just like it. It's a shack in a cucumber field. That's what it says in Isaiah 1 and verse 8. Okay, so obviously I'm picturing this little shack, this Jerusalem, a little shack surrounded by cucumbers, and that's, and we'll talk about that when we do chapter 1. But that's the picture, little mental image that that's put out. And of course you've got Isaiah 11 verse 1, right out of the stem of Jesse, and so on. So it's written in a way to put pictures into our heads. Not only does it have that sort of vivid imagery, but it uses poetic techniques. So in how it puts the words together. Now I just want to give you two examples which happen a lot. So I just want to just talk that through a little bit. So when we're reading, we're looking for this stuff. So the first one is parallelism, which is a poetic technique, the rhyming of ideas, not words. All right? So, for example, Isaiah 9 verse 10 says, "The bricks are fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will change them into cedars." Now you'll notice that this is a poetic technique, and it's actually the rhyming idea. It is rhyming ideas, not words, fallen down and cut down. And build and change. That's the rhyming component in the Hebrew poetry. And you find that a lot in Isaiah. All right, so when you're reading, look for that sort of stuff. All right, so I think that's quite important. Just slow down and watch out for that as you read. And the other one, I can hardly say it, paranomasia, which is basically this. It's a repetition of words that are similar in sound, but not necessarily in sense. So example is Isaiah 5 and verse 7, "And he looked for judgment," and the Hebrew is mishpat, "but behold, oppression," mispat. Right? So you see how the words sound similar in sound. Okay? So that's, now what I've done here, I want you to listen carefully, hopefully you can hear it. This is someone reading that verse, or that section of that verse, in Hebrew. All right? So he's paying attention. So he's reading exactly what you've got there. He looked for judgment, or you'll hear mishpat, but behold oppression, mishpak. Okay? Here it is. Hang on. How do I do that? Sorry. Okay.
ויקרא למשפט והנה משפח.
We'll do it again.
ויקרא למשפט והנה משפח.
All right. Got the idea there? So Bullinger puts it this way. We might English this by rendering it, "He looked for equity, but behold iniquity." See how they're rhyming. It sounds similar, but they've got totally the opposite meaning. All right? Equity versus iniquity. All right? So you'll find that a lot in the book as well. So we just need to slow down and to look for that. That is the Hebrew poetry part of it. And also through Isaiah, you've got a lot of songs that are mentioned. So,
sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this kind of what you were saying when you mentioned like a play on words as well? Is that what the
Yes,
paranomasia
that's right. Yes, exactly. We would read it, it's a play on words, but it's actually part of Hebrew poetry. That's the style. Yes, exactly. So the other thing you should just write down in your notes is this. The second thing is songs and rejoicing run right through the book. So when we read it, that's why sometimes there's a lot. It's full of this imagery, all right, and all of this poetic language. So that's really what we're going to get across. It's full of song as well. So all that imagery continues in song. So you have Isaiah 44 and verse 23. We won't look these up, but Isaiah 44 verse 23. It has the mountains and the trees are singing. All right, so they're singing, but it's mountains and trees singing. So picture that. Just think about it and picture that as you read. Isaiah 55 and verse 12, it has mountains singing and trees clapping. Isaiah 35 and verse 2, which we know well, the wilderness blooming and so on. It has the wilderness bursting into song. All right, so the wilderness is singing. there's this singing of the desert as it comes alive, and there's rejoicing and there's joy in the desert, which we know it's obviously desert doesn't rejoice. It's again those play on words and that figure of speech that it's using, this time in song. You can add to that list, by the way, Isaiah 5 verses 1 to 7, which has Isaiah singing on behalf of God about God's vineyard. And also, you can add this quotation, chapter 12 and verse 5 to 6, which has Isaiah telling others to sing. So he says, sing unto the Lord, cry out and shout, thou inhabitant of Zion. All right, so that's just gives you an example of the singing in the book. So really, when we come to Isaiah, what we really need to do is this first point. What does it mean for me? Well, the first thing I think is worth writing down on your notes is that we need to read Isaiah slowly, and we need to stop, and we need to think. Let God's pictures build in our minds. It's designed to get pictures into our heads, full of depth and colour and imagery. And it's probably what's a good idea is to actually, after the class tonight or tomorrow or sometime, just sit somewhere by yourself and read 2 verses. Pick anything in Isaiah and just read 2 verses. And just think about what it actually is saying. What's the imagery, first of all? Not the meaning necessarily and all of that, but when you read something, all flesh is grass, well, just sit and think about that. Like picture something in your mind that is trying to be generated by Isaiah. Now, is that helpful? So that's just really a bit of a feel for the book of why things are put in a certain way, and this you'll find it this repetition and parallel statements and so on. We just need to be aware of that as we read. All right? So what's the vision about? So let's have a look then. What's our heading say? So it says, the vision of Isaiah the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. So it's concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It's a vision about those two places and people. So in the book you have, and this is something as an exercise, you can cover this later, this is a bit of homework for all of us, and I've done it. It's fantastic, I love colouring. So 47 times Zion appears, and 49 times you have Jerusalem appears, so that's 96 times Zion and Jerusalem is mentioned in the book. And you have Judah mentioned 29 times. Now that's then to be the focus of the book. Now that doesn't mean Israel as a whole is ignored, because you've got the title of God, by the way, mentioned a number of, that's another theme through the book as well, the Holy One of Israel, that's there 26 times, and you've got it there in verse 4, this verse time. Sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters, they've forsaken the Lord, they have provoked the Holy One of Israel. So it's not as though he's cast off Israel or anything like that, because eventually he's going to join Judah and Ephraim together. But he doesn't ignore them, but the focus is on Judah and Jerusalem. And Israel is mentioned from time to time as Judah is following the same path as Israel did. And it doesn't mean either that other nations are ignored, because you've actually got chapters 13 to 23, which is all about the burdens of a whole list of nations. And the question is, of course, why are they all mentioned from chapter 13 to chapter 23 when you read the burdens? Oh, I think there's a fantastic answer about that, which we're not going to tell you. So you'll have to find it out. We'll talk about that.
Next year.
No, I didn't say that. Right, so there we go. So the focus and the subject of the book concerns Judah and Jerusalem. And it's not just Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Isaiah, but it's really about God's chosen people over time and God's chosen city over time. I think that's quite important just to note. It's not just about it in the days of Isaiah, but it's about God's chosen people over time and God's chosen city over time. Now, what about Judah and Jerusalem? Well, chapter 1 really provides us with a summary of the whole book, and we'll deal with that next week. And the whole structure, everything is in chapter 1. I think it's fantastic when we see it. But what we want to do tonight is just to consider that embedded in chapter 1, as you'd expect, is really what the whole book is about in just 4 verses. So I think it's really worthwhile getting a different colouring pencil and just colouring these 4 verses in, because this is what the whole book is about, and it's summarised in 4 verses in chapter 1 of Isaiah. So let's just notice it. Chapter 1 and verse 21. Verse 21. How is the faithful city become an harlot? It was full of judgment, righteousness lodged in it, but now murderers. So God's chosen city, the city of David, the city of the great king, and now look what it has become. The once faithful city had become a harlot, the very opposite to faithful. I think that's interesting, the way it puts it. It's very opposite to faithful. It's a harlot. There's no justice. There's no righteousness in that city now. Now, that was the condition of the people in the days of Isaiah. But look what he intends to do with that people. And here's the other contrast. So that's one verse, verse 21. Now have a read of verse 25 to 27, because here's the other side. And I will turn my hand upon thee, and purely purge away thy dross, and take away all thy tin. And I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counsellors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion shall be redeemed with judgment, and her converts with righteousness. So you notice the contrast between verse 21, the harlot city, to be called now the city of righteousness, the faithful city. You see that? I think if we get that picture, if we walk away with nothing else tonight, those 4 verses is the key to the book. It's a total change from verse 21. It's the harlot city to a faithful city. It's a city without righteousness to a city of righteousness. You see the huge contrasts there. All right? So that's really important. So let's sort of summarise the point then. This is on your notes as well. You just need to complete the middle circle on your notes just so keep you alive and awake. So really, the whole book, the whole vision is about God's transformation of Judah and Jerusalem from a harlot city to a faithful one. All right, so for those who can't see the screen, I'll just say that again. It's God's transformation of Judah and Jerusalem from a harlot city to a faithful one. We've got Isaiah 1 verse 1, verse 21, and verse 25 to 27. That's kind of the hub.
And is there an implication in transforming the city? Is the implication transforming us?
Us as now sitting in the room. Yeah, believers. Yes, it's the same. Well, hopefully you'll see that in a second. That the process that he uses to redeem this people is the same as us. Yes, and hopefully I'll just pick that up in a moment. Yes, exactly. We all have to go through this, so that's why it's important to see the process. And it's quite an interesting process. All right. Great question. Thank you. All right. So that's the summary of what the book's about. Right. So let's. You'll notice verse 26. The city is called the city of righteousness and the faithful city after something has occurred. What is it that has? What's occurred for it to be called the faithful city? Purging. That's right. In verse 25. All right. So there's a purging. So the Net Bible puts it this way. At verse 25, it says, "I will attack you. I will purify your metal with flux. I will remove your slag." So he puts it in the metallurgist sort of thing, where he's actually going to bring judgment to bear, to remove the wickedness. It's to bring extreme heat to bear, to humble and to cleanse. That's what he has to do with the nation. Metallurgy, they tell me you've got to get it over 1,000 degrees Celsius to get the rubbish out of metal, 1,200 degrees and so on, it says, depending on the type of metal. So there's a lot of heat that needs to be brought to really to cleanse it. And that's the wording that he uses here in verse 25. Judgment was coming. And not only that, he says, so there's judgment coming. What else does he say? What was he going to do? Sorry, someone was going to say.
Restore the judges and the council.
Yes, that's right. Restore, verse 26, godly leadership. And verse 27 says, Zion shall be redeemed with judgment, and her converts, I think the margin of the King James says, they that return of her. It's actually the same word used for restore in verse 26. So he's going to restore people, but it's going to be based on justice and righteousness. So what we get out of that, very quickly, I suppose, is he's going to bring further judgment upon them, and incredibly, it was to save a remnant. Does everyone see that? There was judgment was going to come, and I think, incredibly, out of judgment and the suffering that was coming, he was actually working to save a remnant of them. And the reason that actually at Bible school, for those who were there, they had a Jewish fellow came in on the Tuesday night or whatever, and talk about the Holocaust and so on. And it just struck me that he didn't believe in a God. And he was asked something about that on the night, and he refused to answer the question. It was the only question he didn't answer. And he said, okay, I won't answer that question. Because he couldn't say whether there was a God or not after he'd gone through all this experience. And to me, that just highlights why God has to deal with them the way he does. All right, so hopefully we're not down that end of the scale, but with the Jewish people, it seems to be that's what he has to do time and time again. And so that's what he's talking about here. He was going to save, and he's going to redeem a remnant through judgment, through bringing judgment upon them. Now, it's the same principle. Have a look in chapter 4, verse 4. He says it again. Chapter 4, verse 4. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. So that's quite a good little cross-reference just to cement that idea in. He's going to save a remnant through judgment, which is kind of interesting of how he's going to do it. So what they were to experience was designed not to totally destroy the city and the people, but to ultimately to redeem Zion. Now, to answer your question, Jamin, it's when we get to this point, we understand that. Does that make sense? Of what he has to do to the people, or where do we fit in with that? And you kind of, to me, when I read that, it kind of, does it worry you a little bit? Is you think, well, isn't good people going to get caught up in the judgment that was going to come? You know, there was, I've got a thing in a minute to show you that there was wars and there was invasions by all the different nations, and there was an invasion from Syria and Israel. Then there was Assyrians, and then there was going to be the Babylonians taking them into captivity, and then Romans and so on. Now, like good people, godly people get caught up in that. Is that right? Is that fair? And to me, I think it's just amazing, because if you come across to Isaiah 57, it actually says that very thing. Isaiah 57. Why did God allow good people to die? Isaiah 57, verse 1. I think it's just a fantastic passage. Isaiah 57, verse 1 says, "The righteous perisheth, and no man lays it to heart. And merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace. They shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness." Now, the power of that, I would suggest, is this. I think it's here he's saying, well, the very question is, well, you've got the righteous perishing and you've got the merciful men, and they're taken away. And you say, well, why? Why? Well, I think, you see what it says at the end of verse 1? The right is taken away from the evil that is to come.
Enoch's died.
That kind of thing. Yeah, they're taken away. Well, they're dead. In this case, they died. They're dead. Yeah, like Enoch. Yep. But this time in judgment, they're caught up and they're taken away. They perish, and people look at that and say, "Wow, that's unfair." But actually, God's got a bigger view. He's got an amazing view. He's trying to save them. He knows what's about to come, and he's actually decided that they don't have to suffer that. they're going to die now, and they don't have to go through the suffering that was to come on that nation.
Can I just make a really quick comment?
Yeah.
Like reverting back to your metallurgical stuff.
Yeah.
If you look at the idea of purging through metal,
Yeah.
when you've got an imperfect metal and it is superheated like you're talking about, the reason it's done is so that because when you start, the imperfections are mixed in with the good metal.
Yep.
And then through that process, the
Okay.
bad is brought to the top and scraped off.
Right.
And if you bring that to life and death, sure, the good people may die for now.
Yeah.
But the reason that God has purged that is so that the purity of the good things within that metal, that's all that's left to be reused for another time.
All right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I think we've got an amazing God. When you think about that, that He was delivering them from the terrible destruction that was coming, and now they rested in hope of the resurrection. And I think that gives us confidence then that we can actually, from our point of view, Jamin, just to try and hopefully answer, just to see a relevance to us. Yes, we go through things, we suffer things in life, but never think that God's just, he's not seeing the real problems here, and he's not, he's seeing the big picture. And in this case, he actually was taking people out of the way so that they weren't going to suffer what others were going to suffer. He's got the end result, and he sees the bigger picture. And I think, just like the suffering was to come on Judah, so he could say the remnant, we all go through the ringer of life, as Hebrews 12 talks about. We all go through that because God is actually trying to do the best for us.
And very hard to see sometimes.
Oh yeah, despite our view of it, we look at it and we're not seeing that at all. And people weren't here, and they said, well, wait a minute, all the righteous are perishing. That's ridiculous. That's a stupid thing to do. And I just love Isaiah 57 and verses 1 and 2. I just think it just puts the bigger picture in view.
Michael, can I just contribute here?
Yeah.
That in fact, 57 verse 1 is absolutely correct. The righteous people are perishing. So they're a vast minority. Vast minority.
That's right.
And Isaiah's complaint is that Israel is the same as when they came out of Egypt.
Yes, that's
adulterers
right.
and idolaters.
Yeah.
And so Jeremiah goes on to say exactly, and Ezekiel. All right? And that's why the nation's being trashed
That's
by
right.
God.
Yeah. No, exactly. All right. And so basically what we have then, what did I want to show? Oh, yeah. So what we need to do is put, well, how, I meant to put that up earlier, by the way, sorry. Just a bit of a summary. What have we discovered? Well, how does he actually transform them? Well, he saves a remnant with judgment. We saw that in the key verses, chapter 1, verse 25 to 27, and chapter 4 and verse 4. So that's how he does it. He saves a remnant with judgment. And I think that's fantastic. That's a really good to understand how he's doing it. All right, so that's hopefully clear enough. And basically by the end of the book, we find that Isaiah, and this is where we come into it again, has presented not just Judah and Jerusalem, but he now brings us, because he actually goes through, I think I was going to move those. He takes them through, this is redeeming a remnant with judgment, so he takes them through Syria and so on, a Syrian crisis. What I wanted to show was this, that he actually finally brings about the New Jerusalem, which is actually unites Jew and Gentile, and we're involved here as well, through the same process. So that finally he has New Jerusalem, and that's where the book sort of takes us to. We're taken from just the people of Judah and Jerusalem, the Jews, and now we've got the Gentiles involved in a New Jerusalem at the end. That's what the vision is about. And woven through it, just to complete the picture on your diagram, down the bottom, woven throughout is the promise of Messiah, the unrivaled Redeemer, destined to fulfill the vision. So that's why you read through it and you think, oh, this is talking about Messiah. And it is, because he's weaving that, he's the Redeemer, and he's weaving that through. He's the ultimate Redeemer, and you'll find that popping up right through the book to bring about that finally, the New Jerusalem, which brings salvation to both Jew and Gentile. Now, hopefully that makes sense. Just give you time to write that down. So that's everyone right with that? So the second thing, just to write in, what does it mean for me? I think this changes our perspective on our troubles, as we've talked about. We need to trust God is working to save those seeking him. We see the bigger picture here in Isaiah. They had to go through all of that, and I flashed up the, Assyria, the Babylonians. Then if you wanted to go on drawing it, the Romans. Then you've got, even in the future, what's got to happen after the city's got to be taken into captivity, and finally they acknowledge their Redeemer. Finally. So they've got to go through all of this process of God refining, and he does it through judgment. So he's trying to save them through judgment. That, I think, is a critical thing, and he's going to continue doing it even into the future. All right. So that hopefully changes our perspective personally in what might be occurring in our life. So there's what the vision is about. Let's have a look again at verse 1. What else are we told? Well, it's a vision given in the days of Isaiah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So the whole 66 chapters were delivered during the days of those kings. Now that can be up to 61 years. There's various discussions about, when did he start? We know it was right at the end of Isaiah's reign. If you take it from there and you go right through to the end of Hezekiah, it's 61 years. But we're not sure whether he went right to the end of Hezekiah's reign or, so you take your pick. But it could be up to 61 years. We know Isaiah was born in the days of Uzziah, and that was a time of prosperity in Judah. And we've already read chapter 6 and verse 1 that he started his ministry in the year that King Uzziah died. So let's just put a very simple, I'm not into all the dates and stuff, it all gets too complicated. I've got my own time scale if you really want it. But here's just a high level picture. So you've got, and it's on the back of your sheet, so page 2 of your notes. We're going to have this. So just quickly walking you through it. So Isaiah commences his ministry in chapter 6, and that was right at the end of Isaiah's reign. So we've got that right on the left.
Little black symbol.
The little black symbol. That's a tombstone to represent the death of Isaiah. In the year that King Uzziah died,
not Isaiah.
No, the year that King Uzziah died, Isaiah commenced his ministry. It's a very clever symbol. Yeah, right. Okay. So we've got that, and what we've got then is there's a number of things happen in the days of Isaiah's ministry. So you've got in the reign of Ahaz, you've got there's the Syria and Israel attack Judah, the Edom and the Philistines invade. They seek, and Ahaz seeks Assyrian help, and they come in, and Syria is defeated. So there's this aggressive neighbours, there's political intrigue, and there's the threat of an aggressive Assyria on the horizon. That's what you encounter during the days of Ahaz. And then in the days of Hezekiah, you've got Assyria actually captures Israel to the north in the 6th year of Hezekiah. So that's happening as well. So these are the key events that are happening, if you like, during his ministry. Then you've got the Sargon attacks Ashdod. That's Isaiah 20, if you're interested. Isaiah 20, I don't think I've got that on the diagram. Isaiah 20, he attacks Ashdod, and the nations are then forming alliances. A little bit of a clue here. There's a thing called the Sargon Prism that they've uncovered, which I've got a copy of if you want to read it later. And it's Sargon going off about Ashdod and what they've done down in Ashdod and how he's going to come down and kill them. So he's actually picking up Isaiah 20. It's around that time. It's in this period. And what's more, he says, and that not only that, this Ashdod crowd have actually written letters trying to seek alliances with a whole bunch of nations. And he lists them off. And, there's a clue to the burdens, you see. because most of the ones that he lists in the prism, I'm telling you the answer, but most of them he lists in the prism that he goes off about, they're in the burdens. Egypt, Edom, all of these people. So there's a little clue there, but that's what was going on. There's all these alliances, all right? So the question is, well, who do you trust? God, or you're going to try and align yourself with, Ahaz had gone to Assyria, look what happened there, and Hezekiah's trying to get the ambassadors, and all this is happening. There's a lot of intrigue, a lot of alliances going on. This is the underlying events that are occurring in the days of Isaiah's ministry. So that's a bit about what that little thing's there for. Then you've got also, obviously, the Assyrian. It seems that they invade twice, by the way. They invade in the 14th year of Hezekiah. That's the first invasion, but the actually defeat of them happens the second time they come, a little later on. So that's when they wake up and they're all dead. Remember. And then you also have the 15 years of life which was added to Hezekiah. So that's kind of what occurs, and then about 110 years later, also Babylonian captivity starts. And so what you have is, as we've got on that diagram, is that basically Isaiah 2 to 6, I would suggest, is in the reign of Jotham, and then you've got chapter 1, and then chapter 7 through to the end is basically in the done in Ahaz to Hezekiah's reign, somewhere along that track. All right, so that's just a bit of a suggestion on where the chapters fit and what's going on at the time. That's the background, and I think you need to, as you read, have a bit about that. To challenge is to actually, as we're reading slowly, to consider how the words affected their current situation, and then look to the longer term meaning or application of it. All right, so there's the general background and the general message of the book. I just want to close, and to me this is critical. To me, I found this the most helpful thing to think about, and that's the framework for the book. Oh, by the way, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can read, a whole bunch of stuff about second Isaiahs and third Isaiah, all this sort of stuff. I would suggest to you very politely that it's all rubbish, basically, the one Isaiah wrote the whole thing, and it's governed by not only a few other things, but the main thing is his ministry was in the reigns of, starting from the year that Isaiah dies, right through Hezekiah. That's when his ministry was, and all the ideas that they have, I just think it's a total waste of time. But anyway, you can talk about that. All right, so what's the framework? Now, I think this really can help our reading of the book, because I'm going to suggest to you that there is principally two sections in the book upon which all the rest hang. All right, this I think, if you've dozed off so far, perhaps we're just about finished, but I just want to end with this, the framework of the book. All right, this is quite important, I think. Unlike most of the book, these two sections stand out because they're written in prose. That is, they're normal writing, a normal writing style. It's not poetry. It's just, this is factual. This is some events that have occurred. All right. So they stand out because they're like that. They're different from the rest. All right. And another reason in a moment I'll show you. And they seem to act like hinges in the book. Now, I don't have this on your worksheet, but maybe you want to just perhaps take a note. Right, so here's the sections. You've got Isaiah 6 to 8, which is all about the call of Isaiah. That's chapter 6. And then chapter 7 and 8 is about the events of Ahaz's life. Rezin attacking, and they team up with Rezin. And you've got Israel and Syria teaming up to attack in the days of Ahaz. It's all about Ahaz's life. That's chapter 7 and 8. So that tells you about that. In chapters 36 to 39, you've got the days of Hezekiah. All right, so it gives you the whole story again about Sennacherib coming and Rabshakeh and all of that stuff, right? So that's chapter 36 to 39. It's about Hezekiah. And both of these are historical sections which parallel one another in a certain way, which I think supports the idea that these are the hinges that we're meant to see in the book. the parallels, I think, make it clear we're meant to see these sections as key hinges in the book. I just want to show you the parallels. So, chapter 6 to 8, you've got Ahaz is threatened by Syria and Israel, their army. In Isaiah 36 to 39, you've got Hezekiah is threatened by the Assyrian army. So you've got, in both sections, they're threatened by armies. Ahaz fears in chapter 7 and verse 2, and he's told not to fear in chapter 7 verse 4. Hezekiah is distressed in 37 verse 1. He's told, fear not in chapter 37 and verse 6. You see, there's these parallels. I think we're meant to see this as two distinct hinges in the book. Both of them refer to the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. So that's chapter 7 and verse 3 and chapter 36 and verse 2. Both of them have something to do with a sign. So Ahaz refuses to ask for a sign, and Isaiah gives a sign. Hezekiah asks for a sign, and Isaiah gives a sign. So in both cases, there's a sign is relevant. Ahaz is promised deliverance from the immediate threat in chapter 7 and verses 4 and 7. Hezekiah is promised deliverance from the immediate threat in chapter 37. And finally, and I think there's a few others, but I think all I could fit on one page, Ahaz is told a worse enemy, Assyria, will come. Now that's important, and I'll hang on to that in a moment, but you'll see why. Ahaz is told a worse enemy, Assyria, is going to come, and Hezekiah is told a worse enemy, Babylon, will conquer in chapter 39 and verses 5 to 7. Can you see the parallels? I would suggest we're meant to see this, as these are the key parts of the book. Now, how does it help in understanding a framework? Well, let's lay it out. So this I have put in your sheets. So basically it's like this. Chapter 6 to 8 is the historical account, and deliverance is promised. I want you to come to chapter 7, because this is what I would call the hinge. Assyria is introduced. Chapter 7 and verse 17 says, Yahweh shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, even the king of Assyria. So basically he's told the Syria-Israel threat is really not going to happen. Deliverance is promised for that. But, chapter 7 verse 17, Assyria is introduced into the record and they will come. Alright, so there's this hinge. This is important. So put that in your sheet because it's not in your sheet. And that hinges us to chapter 9 to 35, which is all about Isaiah's own day, where the Assyrian threat is there and there's all these political alliances. And the question is, who do I trust? All right, and you'll find an emphasis on that in chapters 9 to 35. It's all about who do I trust? There's the alliances, the Assyrians are on the rise. Who am I going to trust? And it's linked together with that hinge there. Then you have chapter 36 to 39, which is a historical account again. This time with the Assyrians. They captured Judah. Jerusalem is almost taken. You'll notice it's worse than the Syria-Israel threat. They just threatened Jerusalem, but didn't really come to much. The Assyrians, on the other hand, they take all of the Judah and then they almost take Jerusalem, and deliverance is promised. And the hinge is Babylon is introduced. Have a look at chapter 39. Chapter 39 and verse 7 says, And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So he takes you from the historical record of the Assyrians, and then in chapter 39 he introduces Babylon. And he says, Babylon is going to come in a future generation. And then you have chapter 40 to 66 is all future to Isaiah, where you have the kingdom is overthrown and the nation goes into captivity. But God is going to restore his people and destroy Babylon, and that really is a type of the kingdom to come. Now, I hopefully, and then you've got chapters 1 to 5, which I suggest is a prologue of the whole book. That's another story. That's kind of what I would suggest is the framework for the vision. God's going to restore his people and destroy Babylon. which is all a type of the kingdom. And finally, a remnant will return, the redeemed, shaped by the judgment God has performed. Now, you'll see how we've suggested. Now, if you were to do a search on the nations that are used in Isaiah, I think that also suggests what we've done here is correct. Because what we've effectively said is the focus up to chapter 35 is all about the Assyrian threat. Then through to chapter 36, 37 and 38, that's all about Assyria. Then from 39 onwards, we're now talking about the Babylonians, right? So when you actually do an analysis, I know this is very much accounting, spreadsheets, all that sort of stuff. Here's a little graph I did.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry. You must be back there. What?
Yeah.
No. So here is the mention of the nations in Isaiah. So from chapter 6 to 38, what would you expect? Assyria and Egypt and Moab and Syria, they are mentioned heaps of times in the first 38 chapters, but from chapter 39 to the end, they're mentioned, Assyria is mentioned about once. All right? So effectively, what we're suggesting is the first section of the book, up to chapter 38, is clearly Assyria and the problems there. And then from the remainder of the book, its focus changes to be Babylon, and it seems as though they're in captivity in Babylon and their return and the destruction and so on, and the cleansing and so on that takes place. So that's just, I think, supports that sort of framework of the structure. And then when Babylon comes, over 100 years later, Jeremiah laments. And this is what I find interesting. We're in chapter 39, but I want you just to notice this is how they lament. Notice these words. They're in captivity. Syria, the Babylonians have taken Jerusalem. Notice the words. Lamentations 1. How does the city sit solitary that was full of people? She weeps sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she hath none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. Here is Jeremiah writing back, and they're in captivity, and he talks about it, bemoans the fact there is none to comfort her. And about 5 times in chapter 1 of Lamentations, it says that over and over again. There's no one to comfort her. There's no one to comfort her. How does chapter 40 and verse 1 start? Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. I just think it's fantastic how Isaiah has brought even those words, and it links into what they were going to experience in the captivity. There was no comforter, but they were to take comfort in knowing what God had in store for them, as Isaiah points out. So I wonder how they felt when they read Isaiah's words as we close our session tonight, as they read chapter 39 about Babylon and then the comfort that Isaiah shares. So there's the story of the vision of Isaiah, and hopefully we can pick it up next week and talk about the first chapter. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I might quickly just open up for any questions and comments.
Mike, can I ask a question about the poetry?
Yeah.
Just because it's poetry, does it mean that it's not absolute truth?
No.
Because it's been said like many times, oh yeah, it's just all flesh and grass. It doesn't really mean mortality. It doesn't really mean that they're corruptible. That, you know, you can take it that way, but it's just poetry.
Well, there's figures of speech, and what we do when we read a book, any book, we take into account what does the figure mean, you know, and the context of it. So the figure of speech, you've got to understand the figure. And I don't think that you do that in any book. So for me, we read it, and it means what it says, and it's expressing it, and it might repeat itself, but it's making a point. You know, the equity, that all of that. It's all it is poetry, but read it. What does it actually mean? All flesh is grass. How can you read that? That's a picture, but it actually has a meaning, and it doesn't change the meaning. Like all flesh is grass. Yeah, I think it's actually expressing in a poetry form so that you remember it. not to change the meaning, but that it's designed to put pictures into our heads and words into our head, and that's like song does. So by singing, by vivid imagery, it's to put the real pictures, expressing real truth into our minds. But I don't know, we can talk about it.